Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Big Apple's CoRe podcast. My name is Jack Maseka from the Advanced Group. I'll be your host today, and today I am joined by Philip Pitruzzello from BlackRock, where he's the managing director of real estate, and we're going to have a discussion about Philip's career today. It's been quite impressive. He's spanned between both the public and private sector, and is also heavily involved in mentorship and different non-for-profits, has worked on multiple large-scale projects, again, in both the public and private sector. Very impressive. So, Philip, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Jack, and thank you, Cornette.
Yeah, no, it's, when we first started this podcast, I think we had in mind interviewing people like you who have, spent their career in real estate and have done so many unique projects, and I think that's what people really want to hear. So it's going to be a great conversation today.
Great, happy to help. And I've listened to the prior podcasts, and it's very informative. I encourage people to keep coming back and look for new content.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what we like to hear. So with it being said that your career spanned, both between the private and public sector, what led you to public service in the beginning? Did you always want to start your career there, or did you happen to fall into it?
I did. I grew up in a modest household, and my dad was a school teacher and a school administrator. And in the house, we were always talking about policy and programs and issues, in that case, in education. But I kind of got hooked on public service as a very young person, as a child, really.
Yeah, that was the same for me, actually. I grew up in a very political household. My grandfather was a politician, and my father was a politician as well. My mother worked at the state assembly, so she was, at the Capitol in Albany, and it was really interesting growing up. I never bit to it. I was 8th grade president, and I got in too much trouble. And after that, I said that was the end of my political career. But when you were first getting involved, early, what was that like for you? How did you find your niche as you got involved early? Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. In very early days, I was really a sponge, like most people are when you're starting out and you're looking around and you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, or even just what you want to do, period. And I had this rare opportunity to be an intern in the legislature up in Albany. And through that, I had great mentors, really terrific people, smart people, creative, trying to solve all sorts of problems, and that kind of got me hooked.
Yeah, and see, that's when you're young too, being a sponge, you never know where you're going to wind up. It's everything is so available to you, in so many different ways, and however, you want to approach your career. Was there something specific? Was it in real estate that you got involved with specifically, or was it another sector and then you delved into real estate? How did that look?
Well, Philip the Sponge was up in Albany, and I was just soaking up things. And when you're starting out, you really don't know much of anything.
Right.
So, but you ask a lot of questions, and you absorb things, and you find people who can guide you and lead you. So one day I was asked by one of my mentors, the program leader, to come with him out to the airport and pick someone up and bring them back and, kind of hang out for the day. And I think I was carrying bags and helping out a little bit. And that person was Robert Moses, who was New York's master builder. He was at the very end of his career and defending a lot of what he had done over time. I barely knew who that was, but in the course of a day, kind of got hooked on development and real estate and housing and many other things by listening and hearing critiques of what he had done in his career and kind of thinking about it. So just thinking, and that led me to other things along the way.
Wow, that's incredible. And see, it's just if you had said no for whatever reason, your life could have taken a completely different path.
Right, and at times I do say no to things, and then I remember back that, I don't really need to sleep late, and I could get to the office at 8 or do something. So a little bit of, leaning into things helps a little bit because you never know where it will lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from there, you worked your way up, and you eventually worked with Governor Mario Cuomo.
That's right. Yeah, so I went to law school because that was part of my sort of thinking about how to shape my career and how to make an entry into government. And after law school, I had other great internships and some terrific mentors. And then I ended up working for Mario Cuomo for 4 years while he was pushing lots of major real estate projects throughout the state, the Empire State Development Corporation, assisting localities with housing, and many, many other things.
That's so impressive too, because again, as a relatively young in your career, to get that type of experience in the public sector and to see the processes internally, as far as how it starts, how you get that legislation through, and all of the whether it's meetings or type of deals that you make in order to get those legislations through is so imperative to the real estate process as a whole. And I'm sure once you got to the public sector, a lot of that knowledge and education that you received, and that turned out to be very valuable for you.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So I tell people who ask me for advice, what we do in real estate, in all aspects of real estate, is generally complicated. It involves relationships. It involves solving problems for clients or institutions, corporations. And so big and complicated is what you will deal with and have to navigate with in life. And you can get that experience in many ways. And public service is one of them. Many smart people, lots of complexity, lots of relationship building and learning how to navigate. And there are many other ways to get that experience too, but don't overlook public service as part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely, because not only were you involved in government work, and you still are involved in non-for-profit work and that type of work, and so am I, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm having this conversation with you today. Getting involved in that non-for-profit work, again, opens so many doors and avenues for you to get involved and experience different walks of life with different peoples from different backgrounds, and together you're working to push some movement forward, and it becomes so valuable. So what type of non-for-profits are you involved in now, and have you been involved in?
So right now, my sort of passion group is a group called the Bowery Residence Committee, which is one of the largest providers of shelter in New York City. They have outreach into the subways and the transit hubs. And we also run 17 shelters and some permanent housing. And so it's a typical example of not-for-profits that are high energy, mission-driven, great people, and they're really starved for help.
Yeah.
I'm on the board. I was introduced to them. I sort of self-introduced. I saw them in my neighborhood where I live, down near Bleecker and Broadway, doing outreach to homeless in the neighborhood. And I just wrote a letter to them commending them for their efforts in the neighborhood. They had a shelter in the neighborhood as well. It seemed extremely well run. And that led to lots of conversations, and I went out on outreach with them and visited some of the shelters, and then eventually joined the board as we started thinking about how to beef up board oversight of the housing activities and acquisition of new properties and building new shelters.
Wow, that's really incredibly impressive. So how long, you gave a timeline of your involvement there. How long has that been since you've gotten involved until now?
It's been 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Of really active involvement. It's a working board. It isn't a social board. We don't serve on the board to have coffee with each other.
Right.
And cocktail parties. It's everyone sort of has an oversight role, good governance, good committee structures. And so I would say to people, even if you're early in your career, there's lots of needs, and if you have a passion and can't really focus entirely on that passion in your work life, your professional life, there's plenty of opportunities outside of your professional life to do that. Before that, I was New York chair of an umbrella group called New Yorkers for Parks, and we supported neighborhood parks, the smaller parks, community parks all over New York City, and I was on the board of the Apollo Theater Foundation.
Right, which had to be very interesting to be a part of that.
Yeah, I was working up in Harlem at the time at Columbia University, building the new campus in West Harlem. And we had lots of partnerships in the area, and I was on the board, again, for my expertise and to help guide them as they were renovating the Apollo Theater.
Yeah, and that's, again, to see something like the Apollo Theater renovation. And I think this is what is important for listeners, too, is to understand that we all have our skills. You know, we all have our specialties in life, and it could be a variety of things. Obviously, you know, you spoke about real estate and your understanding and education and work professionally, and that which offers a lot of help to these organizations. But you also mentioned that they need help with marketing and distribution and those different things. My specialty is logistics. So, you know, by being able to just have that specialty, I'm able to disperse, whether it's equipment or other things, you know, very easily because my mind works that way. And I think that's important for people to understand is however you want to get involved, there's something you're good at, and they would be more than happy to get you involved to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Very true.
But as far as the Apollo Theater goes, to see, you know, a historic landmark in New York City to be renovated like that had to be such a fulfilling experience. How long did that process take?
It's actually a continuous process. It's an old theater, has a tremendous history,
Of course.
an incredible legacy, but it's been in bad shape for many years. So there's been successive renovations of the theater. Very difficult because the historic nature of the theater has to be maintained, but performance spaces need to be modernized, new equipment, new seating, and they were in dire financial straits for many years in the 80s and early 90s. So a company I had previously worked for, Time Warner, stepped in to help them financially, and the chairman of Time Warner became the chairman of the board.
Wow.
So I had a very close relationship with the Apollo Theater. I was kind of delegated in my not so spare time to help them out, and that launched them on their succession of renovations. And just this week they announced what I think will be a final renovation of the theater and the opening of the Victoria Theater 2 doors down.
Wow, that's great. And this city needs all the arts establishments it can get. So that's really fantastic to hear.
Yeah, and it's great for the community because they have a lot of community-based education programs.
Yeah, and you know, so many of the young people specifically, and that's where my involvement, you know, with non-for-profit work is, and something I always think of. So again, when you can open up these avenues and pathways to young people, you know, especially those who may not look as traditional school as you know, their route, and you know, they want to take the path of the arts. Obviously, there has to be some level of traditional schooling, but if you can open up these type of venues for young people, you know, to grow themselves artistically, it goes so far for them. So it's that's incredible work. And again, I think what's also very important for people to understand is when you get involved with these type of things, over time, you see the, you know, fruits of your labor, if you will, and you see how far these things come, and it's so rewarding. And you mentioned yourself, you don't have all the time in the world. You're a busy guy. So, you know, it's not a huge time commitment. It's really not. You know, it's a couple times a month, you know, maybe a couple times a week, depending on what you do, but it's your small, you know, time commitment goes so far, and it helps so much. I'm involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I actually hung out with my little brother on Monday, and you know, he's 15 now, and we went and saw the new Spider-Man movie. And yeah, and he's the age of Miles Morales, and like, you know, it's fun to talk to him and see him, and I've known him since he was 7 years old.
Oh my
And
gosh,
like,
that's
yeah,
great.
yeah. So to, you know, see him, you know, come up in life and have the same, you know, struggles that I had when I was a teenager, and just to be there for him. It's just a great reward. And, we're to the point now too, where we are like brothers, and, he knows he can come to me for things, and he's got a girlfriend. He talks to me about her, and, and it works out, just so well. And, I see him a couple times a month. I talk to him once a week, and, it's a great relationship in that way. So if you are looking to get involved, there's more than enough opportunities in the city. And again, your small time commitment goes a long way.
Yeah, huge impact. Yeah, small time commitment and big time impact.
Exactly. And we had talked about it before on the topic of mentorship. They were important to you as you came up in your career. And again, especially when you were first starting out, you mentioned some mentors that you had. Can you speak about them a little bit?
Sure. Just, speaking generally, I think it's important for people to realize that if you're working in a good environment, you should feel free to ask just about anyone to be a mentor. And often we're reluctant to approach people or think that we don't have enough experience, and so why would anyone want to mentor me? And that is mostly not the case. Most people in our business especially, I find this really pervasive in the broadest sense of the real estate business. People have all been helped. They've all had someone who's given them a leg up in life or some advice. So I would encourage people to look for quality people who you respect or heard about or know about or have encountered, and just make the ask. And it isn't so bad if someone says no either. You just go to the next person.
Right, exactly.
So I had really some remarkable mentors, that happened that way. I just went to them and asked them for advice and kept asking for help as I went along the way, and helped me very much. One example was someone who I met when I was working for the governor, and he was at the end of his career, but had been a cabinet secretary to Nelson Rockefeller, and just asked him for help. And then as time went on, he would call me for help. He was writing his memoirs and asked me to review his book and many other things. And these things become symbiotic also. So at some point, you switch from being the mentee to the mentor. And it's a wonderful process, and everyone should take advantage of it. And there's something unique about our business where I think people know that this is a way to move yourself forward and move other people forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And, especially when you're young and you're just getting started, like we were talking about before, there is some level of directionlessness. You're trying to find your direction.
Yeah, I had severe directionless. I kind of knew some direction, this idea of real estate and development and transactions and everything, but beyond that, and I didn't know how to, I didn't own a suit, I didn't know how to dress or, appear, and various people along the way, maybe they took pity on me, I'm not quite sure, but they helped me out and guided. And it could just be as simple as, here's how you should present yourself in a meeting, or these are the tools you need, or that kind of thing.
Right, and those little, bits of advice go such a long way in growing you. And you don't even, you realize it, the person receiving the advice realizes it, like, that person just helped me out greatly. And in those type of relationships, they revolve over time, like any relationship. It starts as a small, maybe offhanded, just request or ask, and then you find that this person helped me out a lot. I'm going to go back again and see if he'll do it again. And you keep going back to the well. And you mentioned, if somebody says no, the second best answer to yes is always no.
Yeah, that's right.
And,
you have to expect.
Yeah.
You have to expect a few no's along the way.
Exactly. So you get those out of the way, and it allows you to move forward to the next yes.
But moving forward on mentorship, 7 years ago I started my current position at BlackRock. And when I got there, I really did the same thing. I put together a list of people who I felt I should talk to and develop a relationship with. I did this in conjunction with my boss and someone from HR, but I just sort of invented this list, and then over 8 months just went and saw everybody, and people were really willing to talk and to help, and a few of those people have become mentors and kind of guideposts as I've gone along. But this wasn't an organized process within the firm. I just did it, and people are very willing to be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, especially in today's climate where not everybody's in the office every day. If you can make a list like that and identify 8 people within the organization who you'd like to get to know more and learn from and seek guidance from, what a great tip for young people as they get involved, in different corporations and organizations to expand their knowledge and understanding and have people to rely on, especially, in a setting and it's probably most beneficial if a lot of those people aren't in your department. Some should be maybe, but even if they're outside your department in different areas, to go speak to them and understand the corporate culture and how they've developed in their career at that certain organization should be so helpful. That's a great idea.
Right, and these were all people who were not in my department.
Yeah.
They were just people who I otherwise wouldn't encounter, or it would be difficult to get to know over time.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that as far as how you made the segue from the public sector to the private sector. Was your first position at Columbia?
No.
Okay.
I was in the public sector leading the Battery Park City Authority, a public authority in Lower Manhattan, developing the 92-acre project there. And I was at the end, really, of my government career. I could feel that I'd sort of checked the boxes in my mind.
Right.
The energy wasn't as strong as it had been, before. And so, and I had already experienced there a very business-oriented culture. It was all about real estate development at the time, creating a thriving new community down there. And so I switched over I went to a small real estate investment banking firm in Washington, D.C., and that was applying my skills on a portfolio basis instead of a project basis. And that was a gig that lasted about 2 years. We worked through a lot of distressed government-assisted portfolios in housing and other things. And when that activity was over, I went to Time Warner and headed corporate real estate. So the transition, which is sort of where you were going with your question, was not difficult for me because my experience had been in big, complicated things. And I just kept thinking in that way. Motivations are different. You're migrating into a for-profit environment, so measurement is different. Performance is a little different. But from what I was doing on a weekly, daily, yearly basis, problem solving, handling complicated things, navigating through relationships to get to a goal, is very similar in the corporate world to the large government world.
Right, because when you're in the government world, there's a lot of different stakeholders at play. Similar to the private sector too. Did you find, obviously those stakeholders change, but like when you're organizing your teams and leading those teams, you were doing it in the same way that you had done it in the public sector that you were in the private sector?
Yeah, so, the techniques about forming quality teams and keeping people motivated, retaining talent, finding people of quality, that's very similar, and the constraints may be different. It's very different hiring in government versus the private sector, but you're dealing with constraints and how to navigate and really get to what you need to get a result. And so in that way, it was similar.
Yeah, that makes sense. But so our listeners know, you have worked on some incredibly large-scale, billion-dollar projects. And, I myself have spent my career working in the private sector too, to not similar positions, but on similar teams as you. And I was at a company during their fast growth stage. So, I understand the demand of, managing multiple projects, high level, high scale. But for you, when you're talking like the billion-dollar Columbia University projects and stuff like that, can you just talk a little bit more as far as what that's like, from project initiation through project finish, and when you set out to begin that project, what are you identifying immediately as, these are key areas of focus. We need to make sure that we accomplish this in order to get to that sort of thing.
Right. So I started at Columbia at the very beginning of Columbia University's plan to expand in West Harlem, and it eventually became a 17-acre, $6 billion program that will continue now for several decades. But I had to really pause when I started, and it was really just me. So it wasn't like I walked in and there was a fresh team of troops already there. I had to think about building a team and think of how to execute on the vision that Columbia University's president had. And there was a lot of good planning work that had to be done, but now we had to move into securing all our approvals and going to city planning. So I kind of mapped all that out over the course of a month, and we realized that we would need to have about 400 community meetings, stakeholder meetings, big, small, some not so nice, some nice. So lots of community engagement. So that became one bucket. A lot of interaction with government in the early years to get all our approvals, the mayor's office, city planning, many other parties. Lots of infrastructure planning because this had been an underutilized industrial area. So there were virtually no sewers, no infrastructure. Wow. Because it wasn't a residential neighborhood. It was really old industrials, a few meatpacking places, some moving and storage, but lots of vacant buildings. And we ended up buying 45 buildings and demolishing most of them to set the stage for a new campus. And then there was selection of architects, which was really critical. There was a fundraising component where I wasn't in the lead, but you're supporting the vision by trying to make it real to donors, even though the buildings won't be built for 5 or 10 years. Yet you need a lot of capital up front to do something like that. And then construction and working with the academic stakeholders to really realize their vision of what they wanted to do in the new campus.
Yeah, wow, that is incredibly impressive. And you could see why someone like yourself was awarded that position at Columbia to lead that project, because you mentioned, working with the mayor's office and different city planners and getting all of that, zoned and approved. With your experience in government, you were able to manage that aspect. And then also in real estate, you were working on large city projects where you're working on whether it's affordable housing or different large projects like that. To transition that to Columbia makes a lot of sense.
Right, and we had a lot of those components. So we had academic buildings, but also theaters and academic research, office space, cultural facilities, retail. So you have to start thinking in terms of how does it all come together, architecturally, programmatically, and what eventually will be the experience on the street.
Yeah.
Someone walking around in the street through newly built parks, and that all has to work. So I spent a month, because I only had a month, to think about this.
Yeah.
And then that was it. It was, like
18-hour
days.
Yeah, right.
18-hour days.
Wow, that's really impressive. And now with your current role at BlackRock, again, large corporation, real estate all over the world, and you're managing that entire portfolio.
I'm very New York focused.
You are
so
New York
my
focused?
focus
Okay.
was to solve a very discrete problem, which was we had leases expiring in Midtown Manhattan. We were in space that the firm had been really founded in, so the firm grew from a few partners to 4,000 people in New York, and so we were in substandard space with expiring leases that we knew would expire on April 30th in 2023. And so when I was hired in March of 2016, that was the mission. What do we do? Do we stay? Do we move? And how do we do it? And how do we plan ahead for it? And then how do we execute on it, find sites, and eventually develop a program, which became one of the best things I've ever done and most exciting things.
How come?
Because of all the twists and turns. So, we during this process of planning and execution, the nature of work changed like 5 times.
Yeah.
So, dialing back to 2017. All of a sudden you had concepts like Convene,
Yep.
which is really resourced for meetings and collaboration outside of a normal kind of office environment with a really heavy emphasis on hospitality and food. You had WeWork, which was promoting really a very different way of working, especially for independent-minded workers. And so that was all pre-COVID. And then COVID has made us all rethink our personal lives, our work lives, amount of time spent in the office, what is the role of the office, and really fundamental questions that a lot of people didn't have to ask and justify. So I quickly became to realize that in the commercial office environment, we're really competing with the home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even competing with a Convene or a serviced work environment, but the convenience of being at home. And so what is the value proposition? And in technology, we are competing with the Apple Store.
Yep.
So 10 years ago, the best tech was at the office, and you could get goodies and great things and a tablet and your phone. And now we all know you can get tech anywhere, and you can get better tech usually than what's offered
Right.
in the office. So the value proposition has changed about work. Yet, we all still believe, many of us believe, that the best work is done and problems are solved in the best way through collaboration and proximity. So how to bridge that gap, how to do it, how to execute on it and make it stand up to the test of time was really my challenge.
Yeah, and what an interesting challenge too. And now you guys are fully ingrained in the new office
That's
in
right.
Hudson Yards, correct?
We moved in. We've fully moved in well before April 30th deadline when our leases expired. And we did it on time and on budget, and even with a 2 to 3 month construction shutdown in New York City.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's not easy.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, today is June 7th, I think?
Yeah.
How's it feel to, be able to breathe for the first time in 7 years too?
Well, I've come up for air a little bit. But, I'm thinking about the future of work constantly.
Yeah.
And we as a firm are, and we're very much in the space of the convergence of the physical, the digital, and lifestyle. And so figuring out where those convergence points are to optimize an experience for the worker and for clients is really what our next mission is.
That's a great mission, and it's fascinating too. And I think that's another podcast discussion in a whole right
Yeah,
there.
I think a few discussions. Yeah.
But Philip, this was great. It's been a great discussion, and we have one more segment called the New York Minute that I wanted to propose to you to learn a little bit more about your New York experience and what you enjoy about it. So we'll get started on that. What's your favorite New York City movie?
Oh, so a movie called Hackers.
Okay.
So it was released in 1995, and it's about the early days. It's about many things, but the early days of computer hacking and some heroism involved. And I love the movie. It's out of date in very interesting ways, so
Yeah.
worth seeing just to see how the world has changed so much. And it was filmed down in Battery Park City.
Oh, cool.
So while I was president there, so I have a little bit of a soft spot for it in Stuyvesant High School and around Stuyvesant.
Right on. I used to live right over there too at
Oh, you did?
yeah,
What
90,
building?
90 Washington Street.
Oh, sure.
Right across the
Yeah.
street, a couple blocks down, but yeah, right across the street there. That's really cool. That's a good flip too. Good call. What is one thing that has sparked your interest in industry news lately?
Really the role of work and office buildings.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating subject. None of us know what the answer is, but we all have the sense that the ground is shifting under us. And so I'm very interested in that. And I'm being a sponge again. I'm soaking up what's coming out of CoreNet and what's coming out of the AIA and what's coming out of government and many other places. And it's a good time to be a sponge in this this field, because I think we'll learn a lot and there'll be a lot of changes.
Yeah, I do too. And I find it fascinating too to see how the city specifically is going to shift, from its current state into whatever it holds in the future, because there's obviously so much great real estate around here. So to see how its purpose is repurposed will be fascinating.
Yeah, and we have to remind ourselves that real estate is never any one thing.
Right.
And it's never static. And that's true of your own home. And it's very true of commercial real estate. And so you can't just be wedded to, this is a building that only performs in a particular way, because real estate is ever changing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so is the use of space. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And then the last question, if you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self one thing, what would you say?
Eat more vegetables. Stay away from all the carbs.
Yeah.
I'm an avid cyclist, so find more time to go out cycling.
Yeah, do the things you love. And I mean, as an Italian, it's hard to stay away from the carbs, you
Yeah.
know? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
with the pasta and the bread, it's good eating. You can't.
It's great eating, and if you're a cyclist, you have a justification
Right, exactly.
for unlimited amount of pasta.
Exactly. That's right. It's right. It's good for the energy. Well, Philip, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on. It's been a great conversation. I couldn't be more appreciative.
Well, thank you so much. My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.